Now, I'm using thread locker. Look how small that hole is. Now it's all the way in, and now you can see up here, so it can go out. One full open system. All the screws from here on over are small screws. Put these halves together and line them up. Welcome back, my friends. So in this video, I am going to show every last detail, every last piece, every little tiny thing that you could think of, every little working mechanism, every little last detail, just like I did in the HDR50 video. I am going to do the exact same thing with the Umarex Airjavalin, okay? So a quick YouTube disclaimer to everybody at YouTube: everything that I'm showing here is 100% legal. The reason being, once I'm done doing what I'm doing here, this thing is still going to be shooting below 500 feet per second. The Air Saber will be way more powerful than what I'm going to be doing here. Everything I do is legal, so anybody who may possibly reproduce or use this knowledge for their own doings, I would suggest to make sure that you have a chronograph, and make sure this is for people who live in Canada. I don't know about UK, Germany, Russia, Mexico, all these places. I don't know what your laws are, but what matters for me is Canada, and as long as my arrows are shooting under 500 feet per second, that's okay. And right now, currently, my last video might have been disappointing to some of you because it said 1500 psi. It was basically just a tester video. I opened up the internal valve and I got a little bit of a difference. I added 1500 psi regulator, just like the Airjavalin Pro, and a little bit of difference. I increased the power of the spring. Little noticeable differences. You have to realize there's three main parts. You got the spring and the hammer, and then you have the valve, and then you got the entrance port and the chamber where the air goes in. There's usually, I would call these the three bottlenecks. So when the air comes in from the tank, you have the hole that goes to the chamber, right? That's one bottleneck. And then you have your valve where the hammer, so you got your hammer spring. Depending on how hard that hits, it's going to open up the valve a certain amount, right? And that's going to allow air in where the hammer hits. And also there's that valve that allows airflow to go from the chamber out through the exit. I opened up, so I increased the spring, I opened up the valve, and I only noticed little gains. So then, okay, the last thing must be here, and that's what I'm going to show you. I'm actually going to have to open up this, and if you were to attempt to do this, just know you're probably not going to be able to use CO2 on this thing again. So make sure that you're listening to what I'm saying, and I'll say it again. You probably won't be able to use CO2 on this again. Alright, that's just how it is. Let's get right into it. Okay, so first off, all the screws from here on over are small screws. They look like this. Alright, all the screws from here out, they look like this. The only longer screw that's longer than those is this one, and this one accompanies it underneath. So over here, this is where your buttstock disconnects. You're gonna have your smaller screw on the bottom one, and the longer screw is gonna be on the top, all right? And make sure that when you do this, you're holding this together, and you're loosening it, that way you don't strip the insides. You gotta hold those two pieces together, take the screws out, then let it release. Don't be just doing it like that, because then it'll just start messing it up the more you do it. So keep these two together, keep those two together, and keep the small ones separate from all the other ones. So the right half is small screws, from here the left half is longer screws, and that's the long one, that's the short one. Alright, now we get that out of the way. Also, make sure you use a screwdriver. I have broken and stripped 2 screws because of using one of these, so I recommend using a screwdriver. It does not take long, you know, just do this, don't use power. First thing you'd want to do after you take all those out is take this, and just remember, the light spring, the weak spring goes on top, and the heavy spring goes on the bottom. And remember, this is for the HPA converted. You can't do this CO2. This is literally for this, all right? I'll just explain the buttstock real quick. You don't need to take this apart. It's not necessary. If you do want to take it apart, I'll explain it real quick. So there's this screw, that one, and this one. You just pop those little rubber things out. There's another thing I forgot to say. You just got to pop those rubber things out. I just leave them out because I've taken this apart a few times. So what you want to do is you want to just, you want to pop these out, and there's a little tiny pin in there that you just push through with like a nail, and you take this out, unscrew it, and then this whole thing will come apart. But that's unnecessary. You don't need to do that. But if you want to, go right ahead. So here, there is a Allen key inside there. All right, so in there, there's an Allen key. And when you twist that thing left, when you push this thing left, the spring gets stronger. When you push it to the right, it extends. Now, don't do it too much one way or the other way, because it'll come undone and then you'll have to take it apart and then put it back together. I've done that once. I twisted it too much far one way and then the screw ended up popping out and then I had to put it back together. So now that's out of the way. What you're going to want to do is maybe set this upright and then just gently pull it equally in half like this. Alright, and you'll see it just like this. And so on one side you'll probably see it like this. This is the hammer, okay? You can easily take that out. So the spring is here and the spring goes in there, and this is where it hits. Just to put that back, when you put it back together, you literally just slide it in there like that. Super easy. So when it gets cocked back, it pushes it back like this, and when your thing goes forward, it just goes like this. So it cocks back, this goes back, and then so that's what it looks like from this half. So I'm going to put this half off to the side. Nothing else here to see. So for this half, this is what it looks like. So this trigger, the way this thing works is this is able to move like this. And when this hammer comes back, there's a little notch right here. It cocks back like this, and then it fetches. You see that? I'll do it again. So it's sitting like this. It comes back, fetches, and then now it's under tension. And so from the tension, it pushes forward like this. And then now here, this is where the trigger happens. So with the safety, all that happens with the safety is when this thing comes up, it blocks it. I'll show you that in a sec. So it pushes forward, and there's this little notch right there, and it pushes it up, and because of that little slot, it slides back like that. So it goes like that. And there's no need to take this out. If this does come out for some reason, super easy to go back in. There's a little hook right there, and you literally it's just here and there. Super easy. And so for this, I actually made my trigger pull a lot shorter, and I'll show you the way that I did that. So I didn't change the spring. I noticed somebody before said shortening the spring did something, but it actually doesn't. What I did was I just glued one of those rubber screw covers. I just epoxied it to this, and I also trimmed this side a little bit with sandpaper and this side a little bit. And the reason why I did that is because once I pushed this down, the safety wasn't working anymore. So I skimmed this way, skimmed that way, and now the trigger pull is much shorter. I could not stand how long that trigger pull was. It drove me crazy. So I didn't change the spring, didn't have to. All you have to do is just slip that back in there if you want to do this. You only need about, if you want to make your trigger shorter, you only need about 3 millimeters. Yeah, about 2.5, 3 millimeters. That's 3 millimeters right there to add on top. And also I took off about, I kept testing it. Maybe a millimeter right here, and then a millimeter that way. And that allowed me to use the safety like normal and for it to function like normal. So all you gotta do is literally just pop this back in there like that. The way I usually mess with these springs, because they can be tricky, is you can take tweezers or maybe needle nose pliers if they're thin enough, and you can actually squeeze them together. And if you find it's too hard to do that, you could try and just pop it in there with your thumb, but you might end up needing some assistance. There, pop it back in place. And now, yeah, it needs to be able to be pushed in all the way, and then that should be able to work just fine. All right, so you can see that safety, there's a little notch in there that allows this to move through. So you can see it gets stuck like that, and that's the way that it works. And then when you push it back through, then it's able to move freely again. That's basically all that you need to know about the trigger system and the hammer system. It's literally that simple. There's nothing to it. So when you pop this out, there will be these two O-rings right here, and you can just take these off and just slide those right back in their slots. I've explained everything here. Now I'm going to put this off to the side. So this piece here is probably the reason why everybody is here to watch this video. Right here you have an Allen key, and on the other side you have an Allen key. you undo those and you can actually slip this off. It's held together. There's like a glue seal there too, so there's no need to be taking that out unless for some reason you need to. I'm not going to in the video, but it's just those two simple screws. Pop it off, and if you need to put it back on, just use some super glue. Put it on nice and snug just like this, and then put your screws back in. This looks a little mangled, okay, but there's just a slit like this. The reason why there's two holes there, I got them filled up with epoxy. The reason why they're there is because I used some thread locker to put this back in. I don't know what I was thinking, but I meant to put the thread locker on this, but I did it on both. And yeah, I had to get it undone. I had to screw those holes, in those holes and use these pliers to get it back out. But that's not a problem. I fixed that, everything's fine. The holes didn't even go through, I just filled them back in. So, all right, so we have this down here, and I'll show you what the purpose of this is. So if you undo this bolt and put it back in, make sure you use thread locker to put it back in. So you can take that out, and then you should be able to very easily just undo this. I mean, I can do it with my fingernail. You can see how easy it is for me to do. So you just undo that, and then you can see this is the valve seal, and then inside is the spring. So when the hammer hits this, it opens up the valve like that, and you can see the valve closes off the air chamber is over here, and that lets out a spurt of air. So these holes right here is actually like a valve limiter. This is a bottleneck spot. So I'll show you what that nut is for. So if we put this back together, so the big end goes in first, put it back in like this. So you want to make sure the big end goes in first, put that on like that, send it all the way back, and you gotta give it a little bit of force, and then you can screw that on. And so when you screw this on, watch what goes on here. Once it gets level, you can see the hole starting to become flush with this. Now it's all the way in, and now you can see that hole is going all the way through up here so it can go out. So that is one full open system right here. But if you go like this a little bit, now you can have a half open system. And this is how you can tune the air pressure that is releasing from this chamber. And the way that you would adjust this is you would have it like this. So when I first got this thing, it wasn't fully open. It was slightly off to the side, kind of like this. And this nut was screwed in, and the pressure of the nut holds it in place for moving. Okay, so now you understand that part. I'm going to put this back together and then show you the other two parts. Well, I will put some thread locker back on this, but I'm just putting it back together just so I can show you what it looks like from the other pieces. Alright, so the only other two components to this is this part and this part. So the way that you get these out, you could take something like this and use hammers. You could use a hammer or pliers, or you could use a nail, and you just want to, so the side that you want to tap it out from is, if this was like this and that was going to the left, that's the side that you want to tap these out. So I already did that earlier. You take those pins out, and so for this piece, what I have here is I have a 1/4 NC20 drill tap, and it worked just enough for me to fit it in there like this, and then simply just pull it out very gently like that. So there's two rubber seals, and the pins go in right there like that, and that's how it holds it in place. And this is just a plug for the chamber. And then for this, all you would have to do, you just take your adapter piece and you could just screw it in there like this. and then just gently pull this out so you don't mess up the O-rings. I didn't mean to do that. Now you can see it's all open. That's where the spring would be. You'd be looking straight down there. This is the place where I am 99.99% sure. First I thought it was volume. Okay, I thought the issue was volume. And I thought, well, maybe this plug is solid, and maybe if I take this out, I could drill out a hole, you know, because I know the Airjavalin Pro, it's the exact same setup, right? It's the same volume, so the air chamber is the same size. This is the same. So this is where the third chokehold is, or bottleneck. And so if you're wondering what this hole is, and that hole, when you're using a CO2 canister and you're screwing it in there, and there's going to be a spurt of gas, it's allowed to spurt out there and there when you put it in. So it's like a release pressure thing. Pretty sure that's what those holes are. So you don't have to worry about them. So what we are going to do with this piece is we are going to open up this hole. This is where the problem lies. You can see the piercer, it's a tiny little hole. The piercer hole is smaller than this one, as you can see here. See how it's smaller? And so what I'm thinking is, I'm more than sure of this, we need to open up that black piece in there. Even though I think it may be epoxied in there, I don't think it's a solid piece. What I'll do is I will take a smaller drill bit first, and I will just very gently work my way through, not this side, through this end. Very gently work my way through, because I know if I do it this end, since it's not flat, I could very easily screw it up. Alright, so I'm going to very gently screw my way through, and then use my second drill bit to open it up the rest of the way, and make it the exact same size as this hole. And seeing that we are doubling it, we should get at least 100 FPS more. And that's what, after this video, when I go out to the field again, where I usually do my shooting with the Airjavalin, we're gonna see how much of a difference this makes. And remember, this is 100% legal, because I can get other air sabers and other arrow shooters that shoot 2-3 times more powerful than this thing. And I'm only aiming to get this thing as good as the Airjavalin Pro, and maybe a little bit better. And I'm not worried about the arrows, because the arrows can handle 400 feet per second, just like the Airjavalin Pro. Sometimes you can get up to 400 feet per second on that thing. And so after I open it up the same size as this, if I don't get what I am expecting to get, then I will make this hole bigger. And then that will allow more air to flow through and charge. It'll allow more pressure to flow through evenly. So I'm going to put this in the vise and drill it out, and then show you how to put it all back together. So this is the piece that was in there, and as you can see, look how small that hole is. Not much air was getting through there. So, I mean, it looks pretty good. It's actually slightly smaller than, but that's fine, because if I like it where it's at, or if I need to open it up a little bit more, it's not too big. It's still got a little bit of space to open up to before I actually get to the exact same size. So here, I completely cleaned this thing, and I washed it, dried it, and now I'm putting the O-rings back on, and I'm putting new silicone oil on it, and I did the same for the inside. So that way everything will seal off nicely, and those seals will be protected for a long time. So you just gotta make sure that your slots are lined up for the pins, and just gently, evenly push it in. You don't want to mess up those O-rings. And the same for the plug. You just want to make sure that it's clean, and maybe put some new silicone on it, and just gently push it in. And just like that, We're going to put our pins back in. Make sure you put them back in the same way that they came out, because they will line up with the rivets that hold them in place. You don't want to go and mess it up. So there we go. So I actually need to take this back out because I popped out the spring by mistake. I didn't put it back in right, so I'm going to do that now. Just going to make sure you put it in, make sure that it goes straight back, and then after it's in, you got to make sure that that hole is straight through, and you push it. Make sure the pressure is in there and the spring is in correctly. Now, I'm using thread locker because this nut is not going to be pressing up against that brass fitting. It needs something to hold it in place. It does fit snugly once you get flush with the metal, but you want it to be held in there tightly because over time it can loosen from shooting and moving it around and whatnot. So it's better just to have it locked in place, and it also helps seal it off so there's no air leaks. And now you just slip on your O-rings. And when you fit this back in place, make sure your O-rings are fitted in those slots perfectly. Now for the hammer, you want to put it on this side, and you're going to put the two halves together, and you want to leave a little bit of space. You want to leave that hammer back a little bit to have some room for the firing pin where the hammer hits. You just want to gently put these halves together and line them up. Line them up perfectly and just close them together, and it shouldn't be a problem. And then you're going to want to put in a screw right here. You can put them all in if you want. I'm just putting in a few of the main places, and then I'm going to put the buttstock in, and then I'll put the rest in. And tighten them until you hit the end, and don't over tighten them because it'll strip. You got to do it just till they're tight. That's why you need to do it by hand. Make sure your springs line up properly, and make sure that you're putting pressure on the back end of the buttstock while you put these screws in, because you could strip this pretty easily. I'm actually holding it, pressing it together, and then boom. And then you're going to want to try this right away before you put too many screws in. So it's working, it clicked, it's fine, it's working properly. So now I'm going to put the rest of the screws in. And I also got a trick for the adapter for the HPA system. It wiggles. See? Lots of people complain about this issue. And it's because of the way that they made the fitting. It's not a proper Picatinny. It's like curved. So you see it wiggles? So I'll show you a way to fix this. You take tape. There's two pieces here. One is overlapping the front part. So that way, when it slides over top of it, it won't catch on the other piece of tape. So you want to have a shorter piece underneath, and you want to have it just fitting the Picatinny style rail perfectly. You want to put it in nice and snug like this. And I'm using this little flathead screwdriver to make sure that's in there nice and flush, nice and flat, tucked in perfectly. So when this slides in there, it'll be so snug it won't even wiggle. So watch this. When I slide this in here, I'm pulling down a little bit and I'm wiggling it and pushing it forward. Just gently doing it so the tape doesn't buckle up. But this gives just enough pressure so it's a nice fit and it won't wiggle. I put this in all the way. I got tape wrapped around it so the wrench doesn't mess it all up, and I just give it a little extra tightening, just a little bit. And now it's nice and snug. And if you're wondering what that nut is, I broke a nut mistakenly with the power drill, so that's why I got that in there to replace it. And yeah, I silicone all my O-rings so there's no leaks, and this can stay together for a long time. So there you go. If you got any questions, anything at all, ask me in the comments. Thanks for watching. Peace out, y'all.